Alright, fuckers and fuckettes. Now, every now and then you get an engine that you can't get that bitch to turn for nothing. Well, this was one of those engines. And what I had to do is I filled this bitch to the top with regular ATF Type F transmission fluid, because if you remember, this very bike used to be in my shed back when I still had a regular place. And I pumped it through and flushed it through for well over a month. But this was the one with the stuck valve. And you can't get, you know, even with that high pressure pump I use, you can't get that shit past the valve seal sometimes. Well, when that happens, there's a couple of ways to do it. And as you can see, I've got a block of wood there. I cracked it, but I had another nut and washer on here and had it sucked in. I got a piece of rubber glove on there so it would seal, and the back one I didn't need no rubber glove. But I got this grease gun, and with them valves sealed like that, or with those ports sealed like that, all I had to do, I did it on both sides even though I didn't have to. But all I had to do, because I had that stuck valve, is I blocked off the intake and exhaust port. And like I say, I did do it on both sides, which I did not have to do. But what I've got to do this with is a good old-fashioned grease gun with an adapter, which, by the way, Napa has those adapters. They're actually intended for metric hydraulic fittings, and you do have to order them. But I just pumped this bitch full of grease. I let the cylinder go all the way down, and then I kept pumping 30 or 40 shots. And what that did is that pushed it up from the backside through and penetrated up to that valve seal. And it won't push the valve seal out. I don't care what you think. If you're slow and careful, you will not push the valve seal out. I've already had them covers off and looked. I did shoot grease past that valve seal. But in doing so, this is just every now and then you get a motor with a valve like that where, you know, you're flushing the motor out, you can't get it past that valve seal. But in this bike, the last license plate on it was 1974. So that'll give you an idea how long this bitch sat. In the first couple of turns, I could hear that valve clack, clack, but it was free enough. It wasn't, you know, with just real gentle pressure, the piston was pushing it up through, and I knew I had pushed grease through it. But here it is. I started on this thing about 6 in the morning, and I'd have to look at the time, but I'd be willing to bet you it's at least noon right now, maybe 1 o'clock. And like I say, I was gentle and I was slow. I've already flushed this motor. I know there's not a speck of varnish in there. I've already got oil in there. I filled the top with Type F transmission fluid. Don't use regular transmission fluid if you're going to pull this trick. And I did pump through both cylinders. Just let them go all the way down to the bottom and keep pumping, but a real light pressure. You don't want to be woof woof because you'll blow that valve seal out. You just want a real light pressure. But look at this right here. In the first couple of rounds, that valve made a clacking noise as the spring pulled it closed. And before I did this morning, I ran a bore scope down. The bore is fine. The rings are fine. So all that's all good. And now to get this grease out of these cylinders, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flush them with diesel, but I'll just use a little teeny aquarium pump and a piece of 1/8 inch hose, stick in there, let it run for a couple hours. That diesel will break that grease up good. And then I'll be ready to fire the bike, but I got to drain the oil again because I got some shit oil in here. Because right now all I'm doing is getting lubrication on. So, in order to keep some dumbass Yankee from making the comment, well, that rust that was on the valve is still going to be in there. Well, that rust that was on that valve is currently attached to some globs of grease that's going to flush out. And when I first fire this motor, I'm going to run it about 10 minutes, shut it off, and while it's still warm, not hot, I'm going to change the oil. And then I'm going to run it about 10 minutes and probably a half hour the second time. Run it about a half hour the second time. With some 15W40, do not use Delo 400. Use Shell Fire and Ice on that second stage. I don't care what oil you use on the first stage. Generally on the first stage I'll use straight 40 weight. Even though these engines are intended for 30. Now, that second oil change at after that second time with the 15W40, the Shell Fire and Ice, I'll shut it down, drain it while it's still hot, and then I'm going to take straight 30 weight, which is what the engine requires, fill it up with oil, and then I'm going to extra fill it with 1 pint of Marvel Mystery Oil. Fire it up again, and I'm going to run it for about a half a day. I'm going to shut it down, and then I'm going to change the oil, and then it's good to go for its regular 1,000 miles between oil changes. And on these air-cooled bikes in Florida, that's the secret to having a 100,000 mile bike versus having maybe 20, 30,000 mile bike. Is change your oil every 1,000 miles on the 1,000 like it's a religion. Ignore what the goddamn oil cans say. That shit's for cars that are water cooled, not for air cooled engines. And here in Florida, it gets hot in the summertime. Change your oil every 1,000 on the 1,000. I mean, right now, look at this. In January, I'm wearing a goddamn t-shirt. That gives you an idea of the Florida heat and the importance of changing your oil. And not pretending it's a water-cooled car that can go 3,000 miles on a change of oil. If you look on the really old oil jugs for cars, it used to say change your oil every 1,500 miles even for them. And on that Goldwing of mine, I change my oil every 1,000 on the 1,000. I've got 1,049,000 miles on that bike right now and have not rebuilt the motor. I've replaced a few clutches, replaced the heads a couple of times, but I haven't rebuilt the goddamn motor. That's still the stock bore and stock pistons over 1,000,000 miles. Changing that oil on time and running that Chevron Delo 400 in the blue jug is my whole secret to getting that mileage out of that bike. But now, like I said, some Yankees gonna say, well, you still got all that rust in there. Well, I just told you how I'm gonna get it the rest of the way out. And the bulk of the rust that's remaining on these valves is going to come out with this grease as I'm flushing it. In fact, let me bring a piston up to TDC here. Now that's nasty. Okay, let's wipe that shit off there. That's clean. So now you know that rust really is coming out. And that's not just carbon coming off the top of the cylinders. Here's a shot of what was coming out of the cylinders at the beginning. Pretty fucking nasty. Like I say, I'm going to turn this engine for a while by hand with just lubricating oil in there and the transmission fluid. I've never drained it out of the head. It might have drained a little bit out on its own. but it's still sitting in those valleys, so it will get everything lubricated. Now y'all know how to unstick a valve. And why did I unstick this valve like that? Well, number one, the bike's been sitting since 1974. This is a 1964 Honda 305 green with a book value of about $8,500, and she has 1,775 miles on her. Like I say, I stuck a bore scope down there. Bore looks fine. How much you want to bet I ain't even got a stuck ring? Just had that one stuck valve, and sometimes you got to do that. Sometimes you got to force grease up in there to get that loose. And I mean, if I fire this up and it's making some funny noises after that first oil change, I will tear this whole engine down. But I've done this enough times that I'm 99% sure she'll make a funny noise the first 2 seconds maybe, and most of the time they don't even make that funny noise that much. Yeah. Oh, that's a goddamn weed eater. I thought he had that pocket bike going out there. But, alright, fuckers and fuckettes, that's how you do that. I hope I was helpful to someone. I'll let y'all fuckers and fuckheads later.